No, they're not exactly synonyms.
Un conocimiento tácito, podemos
We
intentar...
can try to articulate tacit knowledge, but it's a trickier task. It takes a lot more effort. Many subtle facets are lost.
Entonces, es como si usted dijera, a ver, escribe...
So it's like saying, write me a manual on the secrets of making your wife happy.
Pues hombre, cada uno sabemos...
Well, each of us knows from practical experience what makes his wife happy and what doesn't, what bothers her, and we might be able to draw up a list of things, but I'm sure we'd overlook 90% of the subtle details that make the difference between success and failure in marital relationships.
Diferencia entre el éxito y el fracaso en las relaciones conyugales.
Well, the same is true in the world of business. It is subtle details that make the difference between the success and failure of a company, and it is subtle details that make the difference between the success and failure of a movie. We have great difficulty expressing this in words, but even though the explicit or implicit nature of something and the ability to articulate that thing are not exactly the same, a very close relationship exists between
El
them.
lenguaje matemático, digamos que es el lenguaje...
Mathematical language is the most formalized and articulate language of all. There are premises, and they are deduced with absolute precision. What moves to the right when we add, moves to the left when we subtract. Everything is clearly set out.
En cambio, el lenguaje
In
verbal...
contrast, verbal language is full of subtleties.
Sutilezas. Aunque...
Though we articulate it, it involves a much larger quantity of practical knowledge. A subjunctive, a conditional, or a subtle question carries much more meaning than the words themselves.
Estamos diciendo. Luego, por eso el
As a
lenguaje
result,
verbal
verbal language is richer and more flexible than mathematical language, which is very rigid.
matemático que es muy encorsetado. Bueno, yo prefiero...
Yes, well, since I am presenting a view of praxeology that is a bit more modern and generalized than Mises's view, I prefer to speak of human beings who are creative actors. Of course, if we were in the United States or England, we would all have to use he or she, he or she. It's really tedious to read books in which, to avoid being branded sexist, authors write or woman every time they write man, and they use he or she. When I talk about man, I mean man in the traditional sense, in both Spanish and English, namely human beings, and therefore the term includes both men and women. When I talk about human beings, I wish to convey the idea of people who possess the enormous wealth the human person possesses. This wealth manifests itself in the actions the person carries out. I avoided using the term individual because, although it is correct and Mises uses it, it sounds too ideological and reductionist, so to speak. You refer to the individual. Zapatero would say ciudadanos y ciudadanas, to include both male and female citizens. The term individual almost carries with it the idea of 19th century liberalism, of extreme individualism. We don't need those words when we have human being.
Esas,
I'm referring to real, flesh and blood human beings like us. That's why I talk about man, who acts. In any case, the clarification is helpful.
pero está bien la matización. Libertad, hay libertad.
Freedom. Value freedom.
Que él se refiere a que
He means that economics is a science free from value
la
judgments.
ciencia que está libre de juicios de valor. O sea, ¿se acuerdan cuando decíamos
Do you remember when we said that ends are subjective because it is the acting subject who chooses them?
que actúa?
And the same is true of means,
En el sentido de que
in the sense that, as economic scientists, we cannot judge, we cannot condemn or applaud the ends or the means the actor chooses, discovers or creates.
o crea. Les ponía el ejemplo, ¿se acuerdan?
If you recall, I offered the example of the chief of a tribe of cave dwellers in New Guinea.
Nueva Guinea, que se ponía...
His son gets sick, and the chief is convinced that the best means of helping the boy is to call the witch doctor to perform some exorcisms and save him.
al hijo. En el momento en que él
The moment the chief subjectively decides that calling the witch doctor is a means, because it will permit him to drive away the demons that are afflicting the boy and keeping him sick, at that moment, regardless of the value judgments we could make, he's an idiot. What a backward guy. Why doesn't he give his son the antibiotic? At that moment, the chosen means has already become an economic good, and all the laws of economics, scarcity, etc. apply.
basta con que una
If a young lady believes that applying a certain chemical substance to her face every night will make her more attractive, even if it's not true, her belief is enough to immediately transform the substance into an economic good, and all the economics laws we are studying would apply. So as scientists, we cannot, from the outside, judge to be good or bad the ends actors creatively discover.
Sí los podemos enjuiciar.
As doctors, we can judge the ends. As a doctor, I could say, this guy's an idiot. Why doesn't he give the child an antibiotic? I can judge from the perspective of a 21st century human being who knows the most appropriate and technological means to achieve a certain end.
Más adecuados para conseguir determinado fin.
But as far as economics is concerned, my judgment is irrelevant. Imagine, for instance, that people want water from the Jordan River for christening children. I remember that example because in Spain, Jordan water was marketed for many years. It was sold in little bottles. It became fashionable in parish churches for christenings. For some reason, people thought a christening with water from the Jordan River had more value added from the Holy Spirit than a christening with tap water. How silly. If you asked any theologian, he would say, that's poppycock. Well, we condemn it, but that is irrelevant to us, because the moment people subjectively decide a resource will help them achieve an end, that resource has already become scarce, and therefore all the laws of economics apply to it. So, economics is a positive science free from value judgments.